For over 6 centuries, one empire stood at the center of global power. It spanned 3 continents, commanded the world's most vital trade routes, and governed millions of people from vastly different cultures, religions, and languages. It witnessed the fall of medieval kingdoms, the rise of European powers, and the dawn of the modern age. From the Balkans to the Arabian Peninsula, from North Africa to the gates of Central Europe, its influence reshaped history. This was an empire that adapted, absorbed, and endured. An empire that did not simply conquer territory, but built systems that allowed it to survive where others collapsed. This was the Ottoman Empire. But how did it rise from obscurity to dominate the world stage for over 600 years? And what lessons does its story still hold today? To understand the rise of the Ottomans, we must first understand the world they entered. The 13th century was a time of chaos and transformation. The once powerful Seljuk Empire, which had dominated much of Anatolia, was collapsing. At the same time, waves of Mongol invasions had shattered political structures across Asia and the Middle East. Cities were destroyed, trade networks disrupted, empires weakened. What remained in Anatolia was a patchwork of small, independent states known as beyliks, each one competing for land, influence, and survival. To the west stood the aging but still symbolic Byzantine Empire. Once the eastern half of the Roman Empire, it had been reduced to a shadow of its former self, its borders shrinking, its power fading. And along this fragile frontier, a small principality quietly emerged.
Around 1299, a leader named Osman I laid the foundation of what would become the Ottoman Empire. At the time, Osman controlled only a modest territory in northwestern Anatolia. He was not a king in the traditional sense. He did not command vast armies or control major cities. But what Osman possessed was something more powerful: strategic awareness. His territory bordered the Byzantine Empire, a weakening but still symbolically important power. This location allowed Osman to expand gradually into Byzantine lands. But Osman's success was not based solely on military conquest. He built alliances with neighboring groups. He welcomed diverse populations into his territory. He allowed a level of autonomy that reduced resistance. His followers included not only Turks, but also people from various ethnic and religious backgrounds. Many were drawn by opportunity, others by faith, some by the promise of land. Osman also cultivated a sense of purpose among his warriors, often referred to as ghazis, frontier fighters motivated by expansion and belief. This combination of strategy, inclusivity, and ambition allowed Osman's small state to grow steadily. By the time of his death, the foundation of a new power had been firmly established.
After Osman's death, his successors, particularly Orhan and Murad I, continued expanding the state. But their greatest achievement was not just territorial growth, it was institutional development. Unlike many emerging states, the Ottomans focused on building systems that could sustain long-term rule. They developed a centralized administration, a structured taxation system, a growing military organization. One of their most important decisions was to establish a permanent capital, first in Bursa and later in Edirne. This gave the state stability and a clear political center. At the same time, the Ottomans began expanding into Europe. Crossing the Dardanelles, they entered the Balkans, a region divided and politically unstable. Here they faced fragmented kingdoms and internal rivalries. The Ottomans used a mix of diplomacy,
alliances, and military force to gain control. In many cases, local rulers were allowed to remain in power as vassals. This reduced resistance and ensured smoother governance. It was a strategy that would define Ottoman expansion for centuries.
At the heart of Ottoman success was its military. Unlike feudal armies in Europe, which relied on temporary service from nobles, the Ottomans developed a professional standing army. The most famous component of this army was the Janissary Corps. Recruited through the Devshirme system, young boys from Christian families were taken, educated, and trained for service. They were raised within the Ottoman system, converted to Islam, and trained in discipline, loyalty, and warfare. This created a highly skilled, centralized military force. The Janissaries were among the first armies in the world to use firearms effectively. They combined traditional combat skills with emerging technology, giving the Ottomans a major advantage. In addition to the Janissaries, the Ottomans used cavalry forces, sipahis, naval fleets, siege artillery. Their ability to coordinate different military units made them one of the most formidable forces of their time. In 1453, the Ottomans achieved one of the most significant victories in world history: the conquest of Constantinople. For centuries, this city had stood as a symbol of resilience and power. Its massive walls had repelled countless attacks. But Mehmed II, known as Mehmed the Conqueror, approached the challenge differently. He invested in new technology, massive cannons capable of breaching the city's defenses. He coordinated land and naval forces with precision. In one of the most famous military maneuvers in history, he transported ships over land to bypass the city's defenses. After weeks of siege, the city fell. This event marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, but more importantly, it transformed the Ottoman state into a global empire. Constantinople, renamed Istanbul, became the new capital, a city that would serve as the political, cultural, and economic heart of the empire.
Following the conquest of Constantinople, the Ottoman Empire entered a period of rapid expansion. It extended its control across southeastern Europe, the Middle East, North Africa. This placed the Ottomans in control of major trade routes connecting Europe and Asia. Trade became a key source of wealth. Spices from Asia, silk from China, goods from Africa, all passed through Ottoman-controlled territories. The empire taxed this trade, regulated it, and benefited from it. This economic strength allowed the Ottomans to fund their military and administration. It also made them a central player in global commerce.
The 16th century marked the peak of Ottoman power. Under Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, the empire reached its greatest extent. But Suleiman's legacy goes beyond conquest. He focused on governance. He reformed laws, earning the title the lawgiver. He strengthened institutions. He supported arts, architecture, and culture. Under his rule, Istanbul became one of the greatest cities in the world. Architectural masterpieces, such as mosques and public buildings, transformed the skyline. Scholars, poets, and artists flourished. The empire was not just powerful, it was sophisticated.
One of the most remarkable aspects of the Ottoman Empire was its ability to govern a diverse population. The empire included Muslims, Christians, Jews, various ethnic groups. Rather than enforcing strict uniformity, the Ottomans implemented the millet system. Religious communities were allowed to govern their own internal affairs. This included legal systems, education, religious practices. In return, they paid taxes and remained loyal to the state. This system created stability across a vast and diverse empire. Over time, however, the empire began to face challenges. The military became less adaptable. The Janissaries resisted reform. Corruption increased. Meanwhile, Europe was advancing rapidly. New trade routes bypassed Ottoman territories. Economic power shifted. Technological innovation accelerated. The Ottomans struggled to keep pace. Efforts were made to modernize the empire. Reforms aimed to improve administration and strengthen the military. But change was slow. Internal resistance limited progress. At the same time, nationalist movements began to rise. Different regions sought independence. The empire became increasingly fragmented. World War I marked the final chapter. The Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers. After defeat, its territories were divided. In 1922, after more than 600 years, the Ottoman Empire came to an end. The Ottoman Empire was not perfect. It faced conflict, challenges, and contradictions. But its ability to adapt, govern diversity, and maintain power for over 6 centuries remains one of the most remarkable achievements in history. Its legacy still shapes the modern world, in borders, in culture, in institutions. The story of the Ottoman Empire is not just about the past. It is a lesson in power, adaptation, and change. If you found this documentary insightful, like, share, and subscribe. Because history isn't just about what happened, it's about understanding why it matters.